Alright, response video to, I think, a couple of videos. Partly to a response to the fake Sagan's video, which is just a rehashing of the same arguments over again, which frankly, I don't see any point. I mean, arguments like, why don't you kill yourself? And you just say plainly, because I don't think it would be the best thing for me to do at the moment. What kind of answer do you want besides that? And calling that a hypocrisy in the sense that somehow if I found my life to have some value or purpose, in the fact that I can actually make an argument might actually be able to be constructive. I mean, I have convinced people that thought they were going to have kids not to have kids. So I have, in a practical way, probably prevented some procreation. So I've prevented living things from existing. So I've prevented their death, and I prevented this, and I prevented that. And I would argue that's a good thing. And so a good thing happened because I was here to do the good thing. And certainly fake Sagan doesn't think there's any chance of the cause catching on or any of that kind of stuff, so I guess he doesn't see any purpose from that perspective. But I just don't see any point in arguing with me about why I don't kill myself. Well, I guess I just don't think it's the right thing to do. What does it have to do with the argument? Nothing. It doesn't have anything to do with whether life is or is not efficient, whether you do or do not have the right to impose risk on a living thing. It doesn't have anything to do with any of the arguments. Better Never to Have Been, the title of Benatar's book, really doesn't have a damn thing to do with that. So what's the purpose of it? I mean, to imply that I'm a hypocrite? Well, I have already argued that I attempted, loosely, suicide before I was even a teenager. And that from 35 years ago on, I have commented publicly and privately defending the right to die, with the purpose that I would be one of the people who chooses to die. But I guess that's part of his arrogance too, is that he wishes to tell me how I should die. I should die the way he likes to die, which is violently. I don't see myself as a criminal, and I don't think I should be shot to death. Yeah, I deserve better than that, because I didn't deserve to be flung into this slop without my permission. So that's, my entitlement. Those are one of the values we are allowed to disagree on. How you want to die is your business. How I want to die is my business. And I don't have to defend it to you, you cunt. It just starts pissing me off when I think about it. Well, anyway, so then Anekantavad, I got through 1:52 of his video, and he's already, he's saying things that are just so, you're saying, how can anybody say this stuff? That somehow the knowledge of the past doesn't do us any real utility in living. And even if I was a selfish cunt, even if I thought my brain's only purpose was to help me steal more bananas from my neighbor, to get more for me. Me. Even if I live for that purpose alone and just use my brain to scheme for that purpose, clearly, knowledge from the past gives you ways of knowing what does or does not work. You can read Freud and figure out how to manipulate people psychologically, and there's all kinds of advantage you can take. And he implies it's insignificant. But to me, the bigger subject is, the bigger point to make is that if I was to say there's a thing that must be understood to understand anything about what it is to be human, is to understand this part where our brain is now smart. It's smarter than just being used as a tool. It can recognize, oh, you're just using me as a fucking hammer. You're just using me as a screwdriver. You're not using me to figure out what you should want. You're just using me to satisfy a want. And the very fact that you can realize that your acquisitions in the world, how you take, should be intelligent, that you should take in a manner that's less expensive, That's something your intelligence can see. It's not something your nature sees. It's not something your desire sees. It's something your understanding sees. And you just have to have that knowledge that your capacity to understand what waste is fundamental to being civilized, fundamental to being smart, fundamental to maximizing the efficiency of your existence. But that quality all of a sudden becomes irrelevant if you do what the fake Sagan does, which is to negate the existence, attempt to negate the existence of any fuel economy here. To not only say the future doesn't exist, they're meaningless, they're not worth worrying about, we're so much more important. And you can just point out logically how can this make any sense to people? How can it make any sense for people to say they love their children and then they watch themselves vote for policy that basically makes their children pay their bills? I'm going to put my debts, I got gambling debts, I got all kinds of debts, I got privileged living debts even, and I'm going to put those debts on you, my kids. And then you're going to tell them that you love your kids. I mean, how does that make sense? You can't make it make sense. That's when the brain can work and it can say, that doesn't make any sense unless I'm doing it. Then it can make sense, right? Alright, so I guess I'm really not saying this as clearly as I want to say it. So there's this theory that Anekantavad holds, and pretty much I think fake Sagan holds, that we are made to be this stupid bug of an animal, this wanting thing. And all we're supposed to do is use our intelligence to scheme gratification. We can manipulate and abuse and use anything for that end. That's all that matters. That's all that there is. Because, so again, I want to... Because they've annihilated, because they're nihilists, because they've annihilated all the facts that make something else something very different quite obvious, which is there's nothing rational about perceiving my genetic code being any more valuable than somebody else's genetic code. That if we were going to measure them, one of them didn't win a gold medal, and one of them isn't obviously inferior. Somebody else's genetic code might be profoundly superior to mine by every measurable standard. Why should I fight for this code when that code could well be better, much better? That it's irrational, and we should do it just because we're too stupid to figure out that the other code is better, or because you're too vain and too selfish. Because you have all of those 7 deadly sin things, because you're full of a bunch of crass and crude theology rather than full of knowledge of this frailty. Knowledge of it is in a real sense, not in a silly sense like I'll just keep sinning and then ask for forgiveness, but knowledge that the real crime is the waste that these vices cause. And that waste is the enemy. So, I mean, I can see clearly that if you are logical, you can understand this whole consent argument, and that it's a profound rudeness to impose, to draw straws, a gambling game, and then stick them in somebody else's pocket. That it would be very rude to break into somebody's house, steal their money, and gamble it for them. Okay, as if you know best what's in their best interest. It's obviously rude. It's obviously wrong. And the only way they can evade it being wrong is they have to somehow negate the existence of any possible downside. Like all they're doing is giving you the choice between a perfect cookie and a perfect bowl of ice cream. That they're not really doing anything negative. They're not risking any real harm. that somehow if you get killed by a drunk driver, it's all for the best. There's some kind of silver lining. So drunk driving's okay because there aren't any real victims. Rape doesn't happen because some women fantasize about being raped. So therefore, how could there possibly be any such thing as a harm or a violation? Because some women do it, that means all women do it. You know, if one person's a sadomasochist, then everybody's a sadomasochist, and therefore nobody really feels any pain because everybody loves to feel pain. They enjoy suffering. Somehow that contradiction is irrelevant. You know, the fact that if you're enjoying it, it can't be suffering. But whatever. All right. So yeah, I still like saying this as clearly as I want to say it. There's just contingent, an idea, just the idea that our brain is smart enough to judge our behavior. It's smart enough to judge the person we are, the package of needs and desires and wants. Our brain can look at it and say, gee, you're not a nice person. Your brain can do that. I don't know if your brain's ever done it to you, but my brain obviously did do it to me when I was 12, 11. And it informed me that, gee, you're kind of a shithead. It seems like all your friendships and everything you do seems to be oriented towards some sort of profit. You're always looking for a gain somehow. Everything seems a manipulation and what's in it for me. And what does that have to do with the reality that they're just as valuable as you, and that their happiness is just as good as your happiness? How does it? How are you acknowledging the fact that their brain is as real a brain as yours? And once you acknowledge that fact, then you have to recognize that you can't just keep pretending they're cartoon characters, and that what your manipulations are somehow benign, because they're not. If you hurt them, it's real hurt. If you take the biggest piece of the pie, it means less for them. That means they're hungry, or they, go without. Yeah, this is just logic. You just can't play the way you're playing. That's what my brain said to me. You got to do better than this. Your performance sucks. So, I mean, that's what I'd say to Anekantavad. I mean, this is kind of obvious. You want to keep saying your nature is your guide. And I'm saying it's silly. Your nature doesn't have even any competence to be a guide. It's an impulse engine. And your knowledge gleaned through the past, through the years of existing and acquiring knowledge. And here's a guy who's been around the world and done things. You'd think his knowledge base, he would value it. He would say, I've learned extensive things by seeing people in different circumstances and watching how they react and how they live and how their cultures have succeeded and failed to take care of the people that exist in them and all that kind of stuff. To put no value on that, to put no value on recognizing that your intelligence is just about the most valuable thing you could possibly possess, is the intelligence to understand the difference between doing something sloppy and doing something as well as possible, creating as little waste as possible. I mean, you see the application of it everywhere. Why would you want a surgeon who, anesthesia, anesthesia, we don't need this, we don't have a clean knife, it's clean enough, I wiped it on my shirt, it's clean. You want those kind of standards. You want the best possible standards. You want them to be trying to first do no harm, and to maximize the efficiency of the process, not to minimize it. Okay, well, that's, I don't want to beat these to death, but it just seems like such a simple idea. So again, with fake Sagan, all the ideas seem to be based on some idea that he will subjectify the existence of value, and say that all value is just a perception in a person's head where they declare the thing to have value or not to have value, and that the declarations mean something, the opinions mean something. And I don't see how you can possibly make any, how opinions can have any value. There has to be a constituent that has value. There has to be a source of it. There has to be like in physics or something. The stuff has to be made out of something. And you have to get to the intrinsic element and the thing with the simplest properties. And my argument I think I've made rationally enough is the constituent is the whip and the carrot. The constituent is pain and pleasure. The constituent is reward and punishment. The constituent is the basic function of the sentient experience, that regardless of what causes you pain, the fact is you will experience pain. Regardless of what causes you to suffer or anguish or be terrified or feel empty, or I could go through all kinds of negative feelings, depressed, all kinds of feelings. Regardless of what makes you depressed, it is the depression itself that is a bad thing. It doesn't matter how I depress somebody. I mean, there can be 10 million ways I could hurt someone's feelings. It doesn't matter how I hurt their feelings. It matters that their feelings are hurt. And it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing subjectively. It's a bad thing absolutely. I mean, how this subjective nonsense? But this is a way of evading taking responsibility for the fact that the animals in the concentration camps that we run for the frivolous purpose of, flavor enhancement, they're tortured, they're tormented, they're terrified, their anguish is real, their pain and suffering is real. It's a real experiences going on in their real brains. And he wishes to say it's subjective if you recognize that as a bad thing. That it's not in and of itself bad that the pig is tormented, that somehow it's only bad if I say so. And then it's only bad because it's my opinion, so somebody else is free to have some other opinion. And so it just loses all relevancy to the truth. The simple truth that it's fundamentally and absolutely bad. There's no making it better. The pig isn't a sadomasochist. The pig isn't a masochist saying, oh, I really enjoy this. I enjoy when you beat me and shove shit in me and do all this crap. I love being pulled around by my ears. No. That's not happening. The bull loves having the hoop in his nose. But they know when that shit's coming, and you see them try to get away. Unless they're locked down. It's just so insulting to the suffering that happens in the world to sit there and say, I can subjectify your suffering. I'm allowed to declare it meaningless merely through a declaration. I'll just state it. That's the extent of all I need to do. I just need to say the words, and therefore it's real and it's a fact, and your pain didn't exist. And then he'll have these people have the arrogance to call somebody else hypocrite. When inside of their head, they know that pain is pain. They know what they're afraid of. They know what they don't want to experience. They know they would pay real money to avoid the experience if I was going to impose it upon them. If I had them on the gurney and I started explaining what the different instruments were going to do, and they had a wallet, I'm sure I could get money out of their wallet. I'm sure they would bargain for the lesser horror. Acknowledging that it's a real thing. It's not just a declaration. You just don't declare it into the wind and say, pain, there's no torture, torture didn't happen. Doesn't undo it. Doesn't make it go away. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean it wasn't a real thing and it was absolutely bad. It wasn't bad because the person experiencing it turned it into a bad. It's bad because it happened that way. It was experienced that way. Regardless, you want to blame the victim for having sensations? You want to say if somebody comes over to my house and smashes my hand with a hammer, and then you're going to blame me for interpreting it as the destruction of my hand and the neurons and the pathways that somehow I allowed it to be pain? Yeah, you can go ahead and do that. I'm just saying that these arguments are so foreign and inane and silly and preposterous that, you know, well, I mean, in the envelope of your vague religious notions, what's the definition of insane and stupid doesn't mean much. But yes, it seems all quite insane and stupid to me. I can't make any sense out of this nonsense. So here you have two fundamental things. You have the fact that sentient organisms having experiences is the origin of value. That you really can't make value out of anything else but a sensation. People want yachts because yachts are fun. People don't want cancer because cancer's not fun. I mean, it's really pretty obvious. The correlation between pleasure and pain and avoidance and pursuit. It all adds up to the word bad being real, and certainly the concept of less bad being real, and even less bad being real. That these are real distinctions. They're all real numbers. Again, fake Sagan would have you think, even if I don't even know why zero became important, but because he wants to focus on zero, somehow he changes the fact that a negative number is somehow more valid than a zero, and certainly not the opposite of a positive number, destructive to positive numbers. But even again, that argument that somehow one person's pleasure compensates for another person's pain, that I somehow could logically say, well, it's so nice to have slaves because my life gets easy and it's more comfortable, and so it's okay if I impose the suffering on somebody else. Not only that I get to force it on them without them volunteering, but somehow that it will add up to be the same thing, that my pleasure will somehow fix their suffering. It'll make it meaningless. And that somehow we could look at history and we could just say, well, because a small percentage of the human race was very comfortable, and most people weren't, but let's just say they were happy. They still laughed at the dinner table, even if they were eating cockroaches. So we'll just assume they were happy, even though they were eating cockroaches. That we could say that happiness somehow fixes all the deaths from scarlet fever and all the plague deaths, all the orphans, all the battlefield deaths and injuries. All of that suffering is somehow perfectly compensated for, and that all makes perfect sense to you people. You think that makes sense. And if I was to take 10,000 octopuses, as I've used the example before, fully formed, they do learn through their lives, but they have what they have from birth in terms of being an octopus. They know how to squirt away. They know how to make ink. They can do all their octopusy kind of things. Anyway, I kill 10,000. I kill 9,999 in childhood, so one can reach maturity. And that makes sense to you. I can kill 9,999 sea turtles as little turtles in some brutal way, chomped by a shark or pecked to death by a bird. And so one reaches maturity. And that's okay to you, that one happy turtle, so to speak, fully compensates for the suffering of all the ones who lived short and brutal lives. I mean, I just stop at the end of the sentence and I say, well, how do you do that? And people do it through religion mostly. That would be my argument. Seems quite obvious. They lie. They make up a fairy tale and pretend they don't have to account for the suffering that's taken place on Earth. They don't have to account for the fact that the management tools are crude and stupid. It's unintelligent design. It's a stupid gladiator war. That's all it is. It's a dog fight where dogs were thrown into the arena to fight, and the fight means I live, you die. And I say that to my own brother, and that's how the game works. And the attrition rates are real. So anyway, so I'm just saying there aren't too many facts here that matter, but these are really, it's just, these are like the critical ones. I mean, first acknowledging the substance of value and that it's in sentient experience, that if there's nothing more precious to negotiate. There's no material I could make. There's no gold or diamond or anything I could make that would be more valuable than taking a sentient feeling thing, an innocent one, So you always have to make some context, because people just say, well, what if it's Adolf Hitler? No, an innocent, something that committed no crime. It's on the gurney. It's being tortured. And the fact is I can buy it off of that gurney. There's nothing more precious than that thing I just bought. There's no other thing in the universe more precious. So why can't you people acknowledge that preventing that torture is worth diamonds, it's worth rubies, it's worth whatever currency? Can you imagine how much currency it would be worth? If it was your sister or brother, if it was your mother or father on the gurney, Mengele has his tools, you're telling me you wouldn't pay everything you have? Every single cent you could find, every bit of a precious coin, every piece of plastic, anything that has value, you wouldn't trade it in to prevent their suffering, their torture? Well, I think you're lying, okay? So if you just said, no, I wouldn't pay more than $10, well, I think you're a liar. A fucking liar. So don't tell me it doesn't have value. Don't tell me it's subjective. It's real and hard. Okay? And it's just a stupid conversation for you to use this word subjective so you can negate the importance of it when it's it's a black guy. Who cares? It's an animal. Who cares? That's all you want to do this subjective thing for, is so you can be a bigot. You'll know it's real when it's you or someone you care about. But as soon as it's outside your bigot envelope, then it's something to go ahead and torture. And I have to admit, I'm not a lover of things, but I mean, I can do reasoning. I don't like rats. And my brain has deliberately made me sensitive enough to be able to appreciate and to think about how dismal it is being a rat, the 3 years of a rough life in the sewer. I don't like pigs particularly, but I'm conscious of the fact that their brain has nothing to do with their exterior. So their torture is real. And the fact that you won't pay anything to get them off the gurney doesn't mean that I wouldn't. And it certainly doesn't mean that you, in my opinion, you can't make a rational argument for your bigotry. And I can make a rational argument for why that pig is as important as your dog or your cat or your brother. That the pain is real, the suffering is real, it's going to be experienced. And it's just stupid to say that you have a right to negate its existence with nothing more than your fucking bigotry. And so again, I'm back to why am I not killing myself? because you're obnoxious, evil bastards. You are essentially a Nazi-esque, bigoted, fascist machine who intends to own planet Earth forever. And I at least intend to hope not. I'll be here to say I hope not. Maybe I'll wish some shit on you, like getting what you fucking deserve. And I'll argue. And so I'm going to stay here until I can't do that comfortably enough anymore. But then I'm leaving. But again, it's just obnoxious to be called a hypocrite. Because I don't play by rules I never asked to be forced to play by. I didn't ask to be here, and I'll leave at my convenience, okay, when I think it's right to do, when I feel like it, and not before, fuckhead. And it doesn't change the argument at all, jackass. Give me a tank, okay, and some active shells, and then a map to your location, and I'll show you how ready for the war I am, cunt. Well, anyway, it's just pissing me off. It's just so obnoxious. I mean, Fake Sagan is such a phony little prick. And the way he's used his girlfriend in this whole thing to manipulate this into some sort of personal argument. He really values nothing. That's why he's probably alone now. It's probably why only rotten people will associate with him, because he's a rotten piece of shit. I have the good fortune of only needing me to like me. I have a great deal of respect for my opinion, and I'm good with me. And I don't think Fake Sagan's so good with himself. But anyway, I'll just keep saying, just get what you deserve, fuckers. I mean, really, you're going to negate other people's pain or other animals' pain. You suck. And, to Anekantavad, I'll play the rest of this. But, I mean, it just, we're done as soon as you start arguing that my intelligence is not the most valuable thing about me. That acquiring knowledge of how the game works, how the pieces move in a chess game, is everything to playing a good game. And I would argue the good game is how do you not kill each other? How do you not eliminate 76% of the pieces to win your silly checkmate victory that doesn't do anything, doesn't accomplish anything. So all you do is kill things for no good reason. I'm just saying, knowledge of the stupidity of the game you're playing, knowledge of the waste that's in it, these are the most valuable things you can possess. And to say, of what use is this knowledge? Well, yeah, that's what a bug would, that's what a praying mantis would say. What use is civilization? What use is knowledge of the harm I'm causing the insects I'm killing? What use would be knowledge that they suffer? What use would any of this be? What does that have to do with me filling my belly so I can, lay a couple of hundred eggs, most of which will be killed in their infancy? Yeah, what does it have to do with me being an asshole? Doing something preposterously stupid. Yeah, that's right. Intelligence has nothing to do with being stupid or an asshole. It has something to do with being actualizing your potential to accomplish the valuable product of balancing the equation, taking something off the debt side and putting it on the asset side. And that's all I would argue is the only way you can validate your existence. You have to leave the place better than you got it. If you leave it worse than you got it, that's failure. And you're not going to leave it better as a bug. All right, that's probably enough. So I watched this, and I just don't even know if I want to even bother arguing Fake Sagan's convoluted. Well, because I'm an Orthodox Christian, they don't believe in the existence of suffering, and they don't believe that suffering is a worse state than bliss, and they don't believe in any kind of punishments that involve suffering, when that would be idiotic, because obviously they do. So how are you demonstrating anything with that nonsense? The fact that you don't believe in heaven and hell, that was not my only argument. I mean, I argued that God imposed pain in childbirth. Well, if pain doesn't mean anything, why would he even use the word? If pain doesn't have any negative value, why would he even say it? Why wouldn't he say, I wish women candy with childbirth, or flowers, or banana cream pie? Why would he say pain if he didn't mean it was a bad thing? I'm punishing. So, continue your convoluted rationalizations, but that's all they look like to me, is convoluted, desperate mush that doesn't have anything to do with any part of reality. Yeah. So sorry. I mean, this is these videos. Yeah, it's been a lot of videos, a lot of time for people listening invested, and yeah, I should just order it. I mean, I should just do one subject at a time and try to argue them as completely as possible. But it's like I didn't even anticipate that these are the kind of arguments I'd have to make, that I'd have to somehow argue to people that suffering is a bad thing. My suffering is bad. I know that personally, so no doubt about it. And that through that experience of suffering, I know that other people's suffering is really bad. It's not a good thing, it's a bad thing. Chemotherapy is bad. It's not a good thing. I don't know. It's ludicrous. I didn't think I'd have to argue things that are this ludicrous, and to have to defend intelligence as a guide, not just an instrument to be used by our desire, but as a guide in affecting us to moderate our desire, and in some cases maybe deny our desire, because it's too expensive to satisfy. And to do that by intelligent analysis. How can somebody think that's a bad idea? Or how can somebody not realize it's the most precious thing in the world? Knowledge is so precious. Knowledge gave us penicillin. Knowledge gave us hands being washed before surgery is done. I mean, all the stuff that knowledge has given us, and these people are cursing it almost as a fake modernity or something. Insane. Anyway, enough said.